So in a week where Dean Smith has returned to Leicester City, Vincent Kompany is coming back to the Premier League, but will he be managing Burnley? Frank Lampard is at his third stint at Chelsea, and Arsenal bottle the title. It's all kicking off. Mostly Erling Haaland overhead kicks. But how you doing, Mike?
Yeah, not too bad. Could have done with the win over Liverpool, and it was a little bit heartbreaking, obviously conceding so late in the game when we were 2-0 up. But to be honest, I mean, had Salah scored the penalty, it could have been a hell of a lot worse. So I think we can be thankful that we got a point on that one. And it's still all to play for, obviously. I know we've literally just been discussing that Manchester City have still got a game in hand, but there's been some funny old results in this year's competition, so you never know, you might actually do us a favour. I doubt it, but
we're winning games.
Yeah, we just need to.
So we're winning games without scoring. So don't ask us for any favours.
Well, you never know. They might score an own goal against you guys. So every little helps. It's a Tesco's football from now on, I think. But yeah, we need a few miracles, and I'm hoping, obviously, with City's fixture congestion over the next few weeks. Obviously, they're still in the Champions League, still in the FA Cup, and obviously battling for the Premier League, that they slip up some way, and hopefully we can get a result.
Yes, well, say it's one of those weeks. It's a strange week of football. There's more refereeing incidents than you could shake an elbow at. We'll get into that later. But I know you have. Mike is having some internet issues. So if you hate internet issues, make sure you subscribe to show us that you're in support of us of hating internet issues. Because that's what we need to do. Go over to YouTube, FDT/TV, or dash TV, in fact, and look for the Big Gold Cup. It's one of those things. Mike, Mitrovic has been banned for 8 matches for placing his hands on the referee's shoulders. This week, we did see the linesman elbow Andy Robertson in the chin. And there are 2 things to be picked up from that. One, he didn't go down at all. So the next time he goes down from almost no contact, surely that should be questioned. But they're yet to decide a punishment. Now, the FA have said that the 8-game ban for Mitrovic was not enough, and that was for placing his hands on the referee's shoulders. This linesman and referee has clearly not wanted to talk to Andy Robertson and gone to cause him harm, I would say, by elbowing him in the face. What do you think the punishment should be? Because there's calls for like a 20-game ban. But what's your opinion on the matter?
To be honest, he didn't do it hard enough, if I'm being completely honest. Not that I'm condoning violence in any way, shape or form. No, in all seriousness, obviously the Mitrovic issue, as you just mentioned, they were calling for, or some people were calling for, that it wasn't a strong enough punishment. But I think with everything, or every weasel way that they can get out of things, the PGMOL will kind of worm their way out of this one as well. I think it's going to be really frustrating, because there's already been talks about that he's only reacted because Andy Robertson had come over and grabbed his arm or something, so he's reacted and trying to get him off him or something. So I think there's going to be some sort of technicality for them getting out of that, which will be really frustrating. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of these ones that's kind of swept under the carpet. Maybe some shady backhanded deal from the PGMOL to Andy Robertson. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if nothing happens. And they've already said that he's obviously suspended pending an investigation, but it's like they've already come out to defend his actions already. So I'm gonna bet that the suspensions will be, the suspensions while the investigation is going on is going to be time served, if you will.
Well, I think you might be right. I think they're quite possibly going to try and sweep it under the carpet. What I would like to see, if that is the case, is Andy Robertson press charges against him in outside of the world of football. If you're not going to keep your people in check, then maybe someone else needs to, because it does seem to be very much one rule for one rule for another. So if you're a referee, you can do what you like when you like. If you're a player, you can't. That's the way it looks. But more mistakes as well in the Premier League. So Brighton, I feel, was very hard done by this week. They lost 2-1 to Brighton.
Shocking.
They should have had a penalty. The first one was ruled out for handball. But we've seen this season that if it's above the shirt line, then it's not handball. So I feel they was hard done by for that. Their manager got sent off, which I think is fair. But they also sent the Tottenham manager off, Stellini, who Sky Sports made great footage of, where that big scuffle was going on. He was the only member of staff who was nowhere near it, standing on the other corner of his technical area, looking out onto the pitch. Yet he got sent off and was shocked. So, I mean, I don't know how the referee sent him off and how VAR didn't look at it as a red card incident and say, you've got that wrong. Because it should have, because it was a red card incident. But what do you make of the refereeing at the minute? Obviously, we've had the Andy Robertson thing. There was a few other calls in across the weekend that were somewhat controversial, not so much as the Brighton game. But that referee in that game as well, surely he should be serving a suspension for being blind.
I don't know where to go with this one anymore, if I'm being completely honest. I would say, yes, there was issues before Howard Webb took over. But since he's come in and taken over the PGMOL, it's an absolute shit show. Excuse my language. People are getting really frustrated with it. Fans, pundits. I mean, you even look at the people on Sky Sports. You like to your Jeff Stellings coming out and saying, how can they not see what's going on? And it's all going off at the wrong time as well. Do you know what I mean? We're coming. I know there was mistakes at the start of or earlier on in the season, which they've held up and said that yes, we're going to be doing recoaching and all this sort of stuff. And I said to you a couple of weeks ago, didn't I? I said it will be really good for a couple of weeks, or it'll be kind of like overkill for a couple of weeks, and then it's going to go to shit again. And it has gone to shit once again, and it's going to be the case. Do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if Brighton, obviously depending on where they finish, where they make some sort of claim, because I think they've been done out of a few points now for poor decisions. This isn't the first time that Brighton have suffered at the hands of VAR. And likewise for us. I mean, they've already come out and said, yeah, we made a fuck up on this decision. I'm talking specifically about the Brentford game. And in fact, even the Manchester United game. So there's two games of us that they've come out and made issues for. And had we had that first goal in the Man United game stood, it could have been a different game. And obviously with the equaliser for Brentford, with the incorrect offside decision for them to secure the point against us, it may come back to bite us in the arse. And that's 2 points that we've lost out for someone going, whoops, sorry. And now I know that they've taken action against, was it Lee Mason who'd lost his job because he was incompetent. I can only imagine, or they should take a similar sort of action to whoever was officiating the Brighton game. But if it's going to come to it, there's not going to be any officials left to do the VAR, which I suppose is kind of a good thing, because you either need to start again, as you've said previously, you need to start again and get people who aren't part of the game to do the officiating for it, to understand the rules, etc., or we get a higher standard of people within that. In Stockley Park, surely there's got to be a better crop of officials that we've seen doing VAR, because it's an absolute shit show at the moment.
Yeah.
Again, it's so frustrating. It's not even my team that was affected this weekend, and I think I can speak on behalf of everyone. The VAR's crap in its current format. It needs to go. 100% needs to go.
The Premier League being flush with money, as it is and has been for a number of years, this is an outlandish idea. But would it not be more beneficial to spend some money and get an AI to do it? The things that they're doing now with AI, I think you could get it to run the offside. I think you could get it to review things really quickly, and come out with better decisions. It may not necessarily understand the ebbs and flows of a football game, but if you give it a set of rules, it will stick to them. So maybe that's something to explore, but I can't imagine the Premier League wanting to pump money into that, for fear of getting hacked, maybe. But Vincent Kompany, let's talk about him. Obviously, former Premier League winner with Manchester City, astounding defender in his time, scorer of some blinding goals. He left and went to Anderlecht, took over as manager there, did quite well. And then he decided to move to Burnley, of all places. He has changed their fortunes, you could say, from the way they were playing and the sort of style of football that they were playing. He's managed to get them promoted before the end of the season. They're currently sitting top of the table on 90 points. But he's being touted for other jobs in the Premier League, with a number of them up for grabs in the summer. Do you think that Vincent Kompany will come up with Burnley and then have to change his style of football because of the league and the players that he has at his disposal compared to some of the other Premier League teams? Or do you think maybe he might jump ship and go to a club that's got a bit more spending power?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I know we've seen a similar instance to Wayne Rooney. I know, was it Wayne Rooney? The issues with Derby. I can't remember exactly what happened with him. I think Derby went down. He said he was going to stick with him and then jump ship or whatever. But we see with Steven Gerrard obviously winning the league with Rangers, and obviously got a better opportunity, I suppose, if you will, with a Premier League club. But I think obviously with the position that they're in, as you said, top of the league, beat Sheffield United yesterday to extend the gap, and I think they need. That I was listening to it yesterday, and they said they needed X amount of points over the next 5 or 6 games to secure the championship. But I think he'll stick with them for another year.
Yeah, I think
and I think that would be the right thing to do as well.
Yeah, I mean, he does take me as a loyal guy in terms of his footballing sort of associations. If it's one of those that if a big club comes calling, will he turn it down? That's maybe another question. But I think he may struggle with trying to play the fluid passing style of play that he's playing at the minute. I mean, he's got players. He's got some decent players. I mean, Josh Cullen, who he took to Anderlecht from West Ham, I wanted to see in our first team. He's now at Burnley. So, sort of, there are players that have come through Premier League academies. They've not quite made it in the first team. But I think it may that transition may struggle. Obviously, Sean Dyche kept him in the league for a number of years, playing a certain style of football. because that's what he said. That's what we had. That's what we could spend. That's how it happens. They have new owners, so they may see a little bit more money than they did under the Sean Dyche era. But I think that's a waiting watch to see whether he sticks with them or goes elsewhere. I know there will be a number of people who want to keep with him, but a manager who has taken over on the interim is Dean Smith, formerly of Aston Villa. Did quite well with them, kept him up, or got him promoted, kept him up, and yeah, he's now in charge of Leicester, who sit 19th in the Premier League. I'm not sure what's happening with them, but no manager who has taken charge of a club in the relegation zone at this point in a season has ever kept a team up. Do you think Dean Smith and that crop of Leicester players has what it takes to stay in the Premier League, being that it is so close still?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I really don't know where to answer with this, because I know over the last 5-6 years ago they were talked about being one of one of these teams that were breaking into the top six. They were kind of there or thereabouts since they won the league. I know it's a bit of an aging squad now, and but they have got some unbelievable players, and you just wonder what has happened over the course of the last 12 months.
Yep.
Whether it be lack of recruitment. As I said, it's a bit of an aging squad anyway that's causing the issues. But I don't know. Is this on an interim basis till the end of the season, or is this a permanent appointment?
He's a caretaker manager at the minute. They tried to get Graham Potter. He said, no, I need to take a break. So I'm interested, but I want to take till the end of the season to recoup, review, and whatnot. They then was about to sign Jesse Marsh, as were somebody else as well, the former Leeds manager, but he wanted a really long contract again, and that put a stop to it. I think he wanted a 6-year contract, and they said, no, we're not going to play that game. So that was all but signed, sealed, and delivered, and fell through. So they've now appointed Dean Smith till the end of the season. I mean, they've got 8 games to play.
Again, it's really hard to understand what's going to happen, because again, it's been, dare I say it, an exciting season. The fact that anyone can beat anyone.
Yep.
Nowadays, you kind of have an idea. I mean, we obviously made our predictions at the start of the season, and I think we've done okay in terms of our predictions, but there's been a few surprises in there that have done better, and kind of vice versa, where those teams where we predicted them to be higher up in the league have actually done quite poorly. So again, because it is so tight at the bottom, it's going to be very hard to kind of predict what's going on. Obviously, we know in his spell with Aston Villa and in the Championship, and then obviously coming up into the Premier League, they done well in order to kind of stay within the Premier League for the following for the season they were kept up, but obviously the performances thereafter were a little bit left to be desired. Didn't he go to Norwich for a bit?
Did, yeah. Believe he did.
Yeah, so I think it was like literally straight after he got sacked, he walked into the Norwich job. Obviously didn't work out there either. So I don't know. Yes, I do think Leicester have got the quality in order to stay up. Do I think that they will stay up? I think no.
No, I think it's a hard one to say. If he can stop them conceding goals, and I think that's their biggest issue this season. I know they let a few players go for Fana in defence. They've had a few injuries throughout the season, but letting Kasper Schmeichel leave, and not replacing him with a decent keeper. I know Brendan Rodgers probably see what's his name, Joel Ward, is it? As a decent backup, going, okay, he's got Premier League experience, he's quality. I believe in him. they should have in January gone right. We need to spend whatever budget we've got on a keeper that's going to keep goals out. I mean, when you look at Nottingham Forest, they went and bought the PSG goalkeeper, who was formerly at Real Madrid, to try and keep the goals out. They've got a number of goalkeepers on loan as well, and other things. I think the key thing for Leicester is, out of some of the teams that are down there, they have an easier run-in than some of their competitors. So Dean Smith's first game will be against Manchester City, so it's sort of a trial by fire. But then they play Wolves, Leeds and Everton on the bounce. They're all potentially sort of relegation 6-pointers. All those teams are involved somewhere along the line in the relegation fight. Wolves obviously pushing out a little bit more. Fulham are in implosion mode at the moment, as I well predicted. So that potentially will be an easy game, potentially a hard game. It's a bit hard to tell. Then they play Liverpool and Newcastle, which I can't see them taking any points from either of those teams. But they finished their run-in at home to West Ham. And that, again, could be a game that comes down to it. If they win, they could stay up. If they lose, they could get relegated. But I think they've got more winnable points within their run-in than some of the other teams down there. And the fact they have got some good quality players. When you look at that midfield that they've got within Wilfred Ndidi, James Maddison, Yuri Telemans, that's not a midfield that should be in the relegation fight. I do think it comes down to the goalkeeper, a bit of a leaky defence. But again, they have some good players in there. Joe Ward may not be... I hope I've got the right goalkeeper. I'm thinking of the right goalkeeper. But...
isn't it Chris Ward? Sorry.
I don't know. I can't remember what his name is. I'm sure it's Ward. His surname is Ward.
It's definitely Ward.
But yeah, that's fine. But say they have got Premier League experience there. They shouldn't go down, but I think it may be too late to change their fortunes. I think what they've got to hope for is that bit of a new manager bounce on those 3 back-to-back games against relegation rivals. Now, I think we should look at, realistically, the other end of the table while we're speaking about going down and going up.
Sorry, Danny Ward.
Danny Ward, that's it. Joe Ward is at Crystal Palace, I think. Obscure football knowledge. Let me know in the comments if I'm right. Joe Ward is a goalkeeper that plays somewhere in the Premier League at some point for Crystal Palace. The other end of the table, obviously Manchester City seem to be on the up. They have found their spark again a little bit in the last couple of weeks. They are a game in hand over yourselves at the top of the table, and they have a better goal difference, but they're currently 6 points behind. Is that correct? So if they win their game in hand, obviously they're still behind you, and they play West Ham is that game in hand. So I don't think we will stand much of a chance against them, if I'm totally honest. But there is a key game which will either make or break the season, I think. That will be the game that the champions are crowned, and that is when you play Manchester City at the end of April. Are you feeling confident for that game, or are you hoping that the Champions League maybe takes a bit of a precedent? Maybe they pick up 1 or 2 knocks, and you can salvage a draw or something out of it.
To be honest, I think if we can salvage a draw, I think for most part of the first game that we had against them, I thought we were the better team. Yeah. And I know that's kind of cliche, typical Arsenal fan, talking absolute waffle. But I've got to be honest. I think we were the better team, and it was 2 stupid mistakes, giving the ball to De Bruyne on the first instance, and then I think Haaland with the second goal. It was just one of those games. It was never going to happen. I mean, I know we were 1-0 up at the time, at the start of that game anyway. But I think Manchester City have shown that they have frailties. Yep. Throughout the season, where they've kind of dropped points where you thought it was kind of going to be a dead set. for them to win. Obviously, that's why they're in the position they are at the moment. But there's no denying that they are an amazing team. They have got the winning experience behind them. For do you know what? Any other season, I would have said coming up against them in their own back garden, I think would be really intimidating for quite a lot of teams. However, we've seen a different side or a different Arsenal than we have seen over the last few years.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, I don't think we can go there and win.
Okay.
If I'm being completely honest, I don't think we can go there and win. I think the more likely result would be that we will lose. But at the same time, I think we could get a draw.
Yeah.
And I kind of caveat that. Do I think? Do you know what? No, I do think we can win.
Okay.
I'm going to stick my neck on the line a little bit here, and say that it's not an impossibility because they have conceded goals this year, but they are an awesome team.
Yeah.
I'm so stuck on the fence on this one because I don't want egg on my face by going, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. We're gonna go there, we're gonna smash them up. Because I, in my heart of hearts, I don't think that is the case. But at the same time, we have seen a different Arsenal than we have seen for previous seasons, and I think we can salvage at least a draw there. But it's going to be a fucking tough game, no matter what. And I think it just depends on the games kind of leading up to that. Obviously, I've mentioned and you mentioned earlier, they've got the quite a few more fixtures, and obviously depending on how they get on in the Champions League, they're going to have even more games, and likewise with the FA Cup, they could potentially have more games. And it's not, I think that their priority this year would be the Champions League.
Yeah.
More than anything, because they've done the Premier League, they've done the FA Cup, they've done the League Cup. In fact, I don't think they have done the FA Cup yet, but they've certainly done the Premier League already, and we know as far as Manchester City are confirmed that the Champions League is the one that's kind of getting away from a little bit. But the downside to that is that they've got the squad depth to kind of back up that fixture congestion. And I say this very tongue in cheek, but obviously if they can pick up a few kind of like niggly injuries, I'm not saying I want someone to get their leg broken by any stretch of the imagination, but we've kind of I wouldn't necessarily say we've ridden our luck this year. There's been instances where it's kind of got in our favor. But at the same time, it wouldn't be a bad thing if someone picked up a hamstring injury or something.
Yeah, no, I can get that.
before they play.
Yeah, it's a sore knee. Leave them out for a week.
Yes, yeah.
So
a dead leg.
Yeah, the bit that's scary is obviously the Viking up front, Erling Haaland. He is on 30 goals already this season. So we haven't seen anyone score over 30 goals since Mohamed Salah in the 17-18 season, who scored 32 in total. We've got 8 games to play. They've got 9. Do you think he's going to break the all-time record of 34 goals, which was actually in a 42-game season, by Andrew Cole and Alan Shearer? Do you think he's going to break that record and become the highest goal scorer in a single season for a Premier League?
Yes.
Simple question.
Well, we said that at the start.
We did.
Yeah, we said that at the start of the season.
I tried to put a bet on 40 goals.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I think everyone expects it, or expected it at the start of the season. I mean, I know he kind of hit the ground running and was very quick. I think he was the quickest person to like 20 goals or something stupid. But yeah, it was certainly the quickest person to, what was it, 3 hat-tricks? Or I can't remember.
He
what
scored
the stat
more
was.
hat-tricks in the Premier League than Cristiano Ronaldo has.
So yeah, he's absolutely ridiculous. I have no doubt that he will smash that record this year, and I think if they if we win the league over them when they've got that amount of firepower, and let's not forget, I mean, he's not the only one scoring goals for Manchester City.
No.
Obviously, we saw him. What was it? A couple of weeks ago, where he wasn't in the squad because of an injury,
Yep.
and they were still scoring goals. So let's not forget that, like I said, they have got amazing quality throughout their team and experience. But yeah, I think he's going to absolutely smash the record this year.
I think it's one
100%.
of those. It would have been interesting to see them play, having held the form from last season, this season with him up front. But if we didn't have all the breaks for the internationals and the World Cup and things like that, would that have made a difference? Because say he has picked up a few injuries after the World Cup, he wasn't firing immediately. So I think that break may have not helped because he was one of those players who didn't play at the World Cup. But yeah, certainly going to break that record, and hopefully he stays next season and we can see even better from him. I think he's probably the most subscribed player in a fantasy team ever. But it is what it is. I mean, I put my triple captain on him first week and he didn't score a bloody goal, did he? Scored 2 the following week, but my God. And we've spoken about bottom of the table. We've spoken about top of the table. I think that the place to sit now is firmly in the middle of the table with Chelsea. Obviously, they dipped into the lower half of the table. They parted ways with Graham Potter of mutual consent. And they've brought back Frank Lampard, who has come under some criticism for that, partly because the end of his Everton career, they were very lacklustre. The end of his Chelsea career, some would say they were lacklustre. But I think people are overlooking what they're trying to do, is bring back a little bit of that Chelsea spirit with a legend coming back. I know he's been there once, it didn't work out, but it did for the first season. And I would like to cast your mind back to that first season he was in charge, where there was an abundance of youth players because of a transfer ban. It's almost the opposite now, because there is an abundance of youth players because of a spending spree, I suppose. I think that's partly the reason they brought him back, is he worked really well with some of those youngsters. Graham Potter hasn't got the best out of Mason Mount, who's still there. Reece James is in patches of form, but they have got a lot of quality players in that squad of a young level. They are someone, he will be someone that a lot of them grew up watching play football. So there is that respect there, and I think they're hoping that will kickstart and give some of them a little bit of confidence. It didn't happen against Wolves. There was a good goal, I would say, that was scored against them. But again, another team who I think are struggling in the goalkeeper department. What's your take, one, on obviously the goalkeeper situation at Chelsea? Do they need Joel Ward, who plays somewhere in the Premier League? Or and what's your take on Frank Lampard coming back to the Bridge?
Do you know what? I was quite shocked when the news broke that he was coming back. Obviously, there's no denying that he is a Chelsea legend, and I think even the fans are a little bit split on this one.
Yep.
I would dare say that there's a majority split in favour of him. Obviously, just because his legendary status, but obviously he was sacked for a reason. But you're right, they do have an abundance of younger players.
Yep.
Through the ranks, and he did do really, really well in his first stint as manager. I dare I say it, there are. I don't think there are any positives for going back. And I have heard there were other managers being touted around, so your Contes, your Jose Mourinho's, and all that sort of stuff to come back for another stint at the club. Obviously, time will tell at the end of the season. But to be honest, I think the issue that Chelsea are having, just to touch on that point, I think is something that we've seen certainly within the last 10 years. With the amount of new players coming into a club, they're going to take time to settle into not only a new league but also language barriers and
Hmm.
obviously different managerial styles and all this sort of stuff. I think it's very harsh to expect players to kind of hit the ground running,
Yeah.
certainly when they've spent the majority of the time overseas, etc. Now, the other side to that is that they're being paid a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
So, whilst I've just said you can't expect them to do that, I'm going to kind of contradict myself and say that they need to kind of step up their game a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, the Mudryk situation, I would say, is a very interesting one because I know, well, I certainly don't know for a fact, but looking at all of the social media posts that he was posting before moving to Chelsea, you could say that his heart was set on coming to Arsenal.
Hmm.
It's going to come down to his agent and the parent, or his previous parent club. Obviously weren't happy with the terms that were put into place, and I think that could potentially be having a knock-on effect with Mudryk's desire to play at Chelsea.
Yeah.
It's a very long contract that he's got, so it's they're either going to have to wait out for him to kind of adapt to the Premier League, and we've seen glimpses of the quality that he's got at Chelsea, but I don't know. I think there's been too many changes within the Chelsea squad recently for them to be expected to gel that quickly, and obviously have that much of an impact. And you never know. Obviously, with Frank Lampard coming in, I know they didn't do so well over the weekend with his first game in charge. Obviously, back at Chelsea, but you can't be expected to produce miracles in a couple of days. So yeah, I don't think it was a good idea, but I can understand it that it's obviously only until the end of the season, and they needed to stop the rot that was already there.
Yep.
I wouldn't necessarily say that the issues are linked directly to the goalkeeper individually. I think there's issues all over the park, and we've obviously seen that they're struggling for goals as well. So I think the issues are wider, or there are wider issues at Chelsea Football Club at the moment. But it's the start of a rebuild. Obviously, we're bearing the fruits of a rebuild project under Mikel Arteta, and we've seen how well that goes. So I'll be interested to see who they're getting as a permanent appointment at the start of next season, or before the start of next season. And obviously, the players would have had a bit more time there. So we may see a different Chelsea next year.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, if I was them, I think I'd be trying to get an Ancelotti type of manager, but I think that's going to be a difficult task, seeing that he's obviously sat quite firmly at Real Madrid. The Mudryk situation, I thought that was quite interesting that you brought him up. Obviously, there are some speculations about him joining were joining Arsenal prior to his move to Chelsea. Do you think that maybe he was hindered a little bit around the Graham Potter style of play? He takes me as a sort of player that if he's full of confidence, you can say to him, get the ball, bit of skill, run past your man, just have fun with it, and he'll succeed with that. Obviously, he looks a little bit lacking confidence, and he's a sort of player who maybe they need to utilise his speed, a little bit of long ball football, that get Enzo Fernandez, because he seems to have a wide range of passing, to ping balls over the top and say, run onto it. Because I think he's clocked up the fastest pace in the Premier League this season. There's no doubt that he's quick, but maybe play to that strength. Just say to him, just make everything a running race. Even if you only got him on for 60 minutes, we're going to get you on for 60 minutes, but I want you to high intensity sprints that whole time. Run the fullbacks ragged. Do you think maybe that Frank Lampard change may help with a transition of style for maybe the whole squad, but certainly individual players.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's one of the reasons why that they have brought him back in. Obviously, the Potter regime was completely unsuccessful, but again, there were moments of brilliance even under Graham Potter.
Yes, they were playing good football.
And you think this is sorry?
I think they were playing very good football. They spent 600 million, didn't buy a striker. I think had they had a real main focal point of a striker, his fortunes may have been different. I don't know.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. But just going back to your point, yes, I do think that Frank Lampard does have that man management capability. I wouldn't necessarily say with the bigger egos.
Yeah.
I would say that's not probably his forte, but certainly we've seen it. Obviously, what he did with Derby and what he did in the early part of his Chelsea career. So, yeah, I'm gonna say that we will see glimpses.
Yes.
Of what could be achieved, and I would be interested, obviously, to see how they finish for the rest of the season, and whether he would be granted another appointment towards the end of it.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's one of those things. If he goes and wins 6 out of the last 8 and wins the Champions League, there has to be an argument there for him to stay on as manager. I don't know if fans will be happy with that. I'm sure they would be with another Champions League. But yeah, it's an interesting one to watch, because the season he left, they won the Champions League once he'd got to this stage. So it would be interesting if he could then finish the job and go and win the Champions League. I mean, I think they play Real Madrid tomorrow, so it's not an easy round to get through by any means. But if he does it, fair play.
Yep.
I think the next thing to think about, obviously, is every week we do some predictions, and I'm the current holder of the title. I have the trophy. I am, however, lacking behind much like Manchester City in the title race, but there is time to bring it back. So last week we made a few predictions of games I really can't remember. There was West Ham, Fulham, Arsenal, Liverpool, and did we do a third, or was that it?
Yeah, West Ham, Newcastle.
West Ham, Newcastle, of course. Now, before we get into that, I don't know if you see it, or anyone else who's watching or listening at this point see it. There was a disabled fan at the West Ham game who come out and did a bit of media. He got interviewed. What do you think of the result? Because we got spanked, didn't we? 5-1. It was awful. People were leaving at half time. It was horrendous. And he come out and he said, "Do you know what? This West Ham team gives me hope." And you think this is a feel good story. It gets him out the house. It's his love. It's his joy. No, this West Ham team gives me hope that I can still be a footballer. His legs don't work. It was the most brilliant bit of media anyone has ever done, and it really tickled me. And it was the epitome of what everyone else was thinking. But yeah, to that guy, hats off to you. Brilliant. But yeah, what did we predict would happen in those games?
Right, so we had obviously the first game of last week. I think it was a midweek game. West Ham Newcastle, as you just mentioned, 5-1 to Newcastle. You had 3-0 to Newcastle. I had 3-1. So it's a point each for the correct result, but not the correct score. Arsenal versus Liverpool was the second game that we predicted. Obviously, the game was on the Sunday. You had 2-3, so 3-2 to Liverpool. I had 2-1 to Arsenal. And for the majority of the second half, I was like, yes, come on, boys, we're going to do it. 3 points in the bag for me. But no, we defensive lapse and conceded, I think it was about the 87th minute. So 2-2 is the final score. So 0 points for that game. You predicted for the Fulham versus West Ham game, you had 1-1, and I had 2-2. Obviously, you mentioned it was a 1-0 game and it was an own goal, so 0 points there. So total scores for that week, Ian, you are on 1 point, and I'm on 1 point. So the season totals. Drum roll, Ian, you're 6 and I'm on 58, so there's 8 points in it. 12 points in it.
Yeah, we'll say that
12 points. So we need win.
It is one of those. Is one of those things. I think not this week because it's not yet. It's the 29th of April, but there is another big game to be played then, and that's the Youth FA Cup final between Arsenal and West Ham. So keep an eye out for that because I think we're going to make a prediction on that a little bit closer to the time. But this week, it's the big boys. It is the first teams of West Ham versus Arsenal. And in fairness, I think I would rather the under-18s play for our first team because we might get a better result. But yeah, that's the game. Now, David Moyes, I'll kick it off because we're at home. David Moyes
Go for it.
Seems to have a really good bit of luck. Whenever the media starts to spin and those real rumours come when we've been spanked and he's got one game to save his job, we always win. We did it a few weeks ago. We've done it again now. We won, and at the time when we scored, we had one shot that wasn't on target. We had 23% possession in that game. We had a few shots towards the end. I think, if I'm honest, Fulham probably should have had a penalty. But we won't get into that too much. But I don't think you can really count that as a win. We got 3 points, but I don't think we won. We weren't the better team on the day. We just got a little bit of luck. And we're going to need a lot more than a little bit of luck this week. I think the only positive to that is obviously you've slipped up. Man City are breathing down your neck. You're going to be looking over your shoulder. Are you concentrating on this game as much as you should be, or are you concentrating on the other results around the league and what might happen? And I don't want to get injured because we've got a big game coming up in a couple of weeks. So in that sense, I feel we could nick an early goal. I don't think it will last. I'm going 3-1 to Arsenal.
Well, I've already made my prediction written down on the thing, and I went for 3-1 as well. So, in fact, I'm actually inclined to change that. I think, upon reflection, literally just based on comments that you just said, it's going to be quite a tense game, and I think it's one that pundits would have us down to be favourites for. But it's a derby game. It's a London derby. Form goes out the window. It could go either way. And you've mentioned that obviously Man City are breathing down our necks, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on us to do well. So it wouldn't surprise me if we do go 2-0 up, and then you pull an equaliser back late in the game, and then pile on the pressure towards the latter stages, making it very uncomfortable. Obviously, we have got a couple of injuries at the moment. Rob Holding is back into the fray at the moment. Obviously, filling in for Saliba. I think we lost our heads a little bit in the Liverpool game, but let's not forget Liverpool, whilst they have been kind of hit and miss this season, when it comes to the big games, they've turned up. They absolutely tonked Manchester United a couple of weeks ago. They've beat Manchester City. So they're a big occasion team, I think, is a fair assessment on how to judge Liverpool's season this year. So a point away at Anfield, I wouldn't be too disappointed with that. So, but on that basis, because obviously Manchester City are breathing down our necks, I'm gonna change my score to 2-1 to Arsenal.
Fair enough. I'd say it's an Arsenal win all round. Let us know what your predictions are for that game in the description below or over on Twitter, whatever takes your fancy. But Mike, have you got any more footballing news for this week?
Nope,
No.
nothing else from me.
Nothing else from me, and I think that's mainly because not a lot has really happened since. But until next week, I've been Ian.
I've been Mike.
Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. As I said at the beginning, FDT-TV. It's not what I said at the beginning, but go subscribe anyway. See you later.